Hello everybody, this is me, MC Gamer, and welcome to Hyrule Academy, your live radio show where we talk all about Zelda, fan theories, lore, as well as listening to some wonderful Zelda fan remixes, songs, and arrangements. It's a wonderful time we have here every Friday at 10 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on RadioHyrule.com, and I am joined, as always, by a ton of amazing people currently tuned on inside the live Radio Hyrule chat room. We're having a wonderful evening already inside the chat, and we're excited for tonight's show. We have a very exciting show on the way. We're going to be talking about an excellent subject, a villain from a Zelda game that's fairly recent that doesn't get a lot of fan theory and discussions. We're going to be talking about Malladus this evening. I'm also going to be talking a little bit later in the show about villains inside the Zelda series as a whole and what we can do to kind of accept more than just the Ganondorf norm. And of course, as always, we'll have some community discussion and give some latest updates on what's going on inside the Radio Hyrule community. And it's going to be a wonderful show, and we're going to get right on into it after first mentioning that beautiful song you heard at the very top of the show. That was the Spirit Tracks trailer, Soundscape Redux, and of course by Zelda Reorchestrated, which was a huge project to do a ton of Zelda remixes, and they did a wonderful thing. And they're still all available online if you do a little bit of Googling, so be sure to check that out. It's a wonderful project. That was actually requested this evening by Dark Decay, and I couldn't resist starting the show with it. So thank you very much to Dark Decay for that request on Twitter, as always. Let's get talking about Malladus, though, guys. We're going to talk about Malladus. So Malladus, in case you are unfamiliar, in the game of The Legend of Zelda: The Spirit Tracks, he's a Demon King, and before the game, we hear the story that he was sealed under the Tower of Spirits by the spirits of good. And he was an evil demon king. So, of course, what do you do with evil demon kings? You put them under towers. It makes perfect sense. And they sealed him permanently using tracks, train tracks that went all across the land, and they became known as the Spirit Tracks. Spirits of good, Spirit Tracks seals the demon under the Tower of Spirits. It's not quite the most original in naming things so far, but, it's fine. Anyways, so they were... they were sealing the Demon King for some time. However, Chancellor Cole was part of Zelda's team of elite, knowledgeable people. However, he went bad, and he freed Malladus, this Demon King, by getting rid of the Spirit Tracks. And when he was released, he didn't have form, so he was just this demon face, similar to Andross, kind of. But he takes control of Zelda's body inside the altar of the Demon King, which is an altar built on the top of the Tower of Spirits. Eventually, however, through the course of the game, Malladus is forced out of Zelda, and when it's out of Zelda, it actually murders Brine, and it ends up he takes control of Cole, Chancellor Cole himself. So in the very end of the game, we see that the Demon King reunites with Chancellor Cole. They form a giant beast. But of course, at the end of the game, Link is victorious and Malladus is destroyed. So we have a lot of theories that we can go into with this. It's a very subject that we haven't really explored much inside the Zelda universe in terms of backstory and things. But there's a lot we can relate him to, and I hope everybody inside the chat room is excited for that. So a few questions that I have for the chat room who are tuning in today is, first of all, when did Malladus begin attacking the land in relation to the events of the original Hyrule? The Hyrule we see in the Wind Waker. Has Malladus been there for much longer? Has Malladus existed since Ocarina of Time, but he was just inside this other land that hadn't been touched yet? Or was it something more recent, following the events of Phantom Hourglass, and was Malladus around during New Hyrule or stuff like that? I want you guys to try to give me some information on that, and I'll tell you if you're on the right track this evening. I'm so sorry for that pun. So sorry. Second, is Malladus related to any other beings? Do we see any similarities to what Malladus could be? So be sure to give me some thoughts on that. And lastly, is Malladus destroyed forever? Is Malladus destroyed forever, or are we going to see some reincarnation? That's what I want to see. So I'm excited to see your thoughts and theories this evening. So go on over to RadioHyrule.com/chatroom in case you're currently tuned on in the show live. If you're currently tuning in afterwards, I'm sorry, but the chat room is not going to be discussing the same thing you'll be wanting to. But it's still really something absolutely fun, because the Radio Hyrule chat room is a really fun place to be and talk about Zelda and wonderful music 24/7. So, yeah, we'll feature your messages later on inside the show, but for now, I got some more music for you. We're going to start off with a little bit of Spirit Tracks to help set the mood of this discussion this evening. So I hope you're excited for that. So let's get discussing, and I'll talk to you guys in just a few. Welcome on back to Hyrule Academy, everybody. I'm MC, and we're having a wonderful evening this evening We're having a wonderful evening this evening talking about the state of repetition and redundancy inside the redundancy show here that we're having. So I hope you're excited for that. No, we're talking about Malladus. We're talking about Malladus, the evildoer from Spirit Tracks, and we're having a lot of fun doing it, and we're listening to some great music inside the last little break we had. And the first one was the Malladus Final Battle music, and that was a wonderful cover done by Wendell. So look up Wendell on YouTube if you want to find more from them. After that, we heard Spirit Tracks Unleashed, a live performance of the Spirit Tracks theme done by Jumpman FR and Robin Hood FR. So be sure to check them out as well. They're two people that I've heard of, but I didn't know they ever did a collaboration. Just so happened that they did a wonderful collaboration relating the Spirit Tracks. Spirit Tracks. So, we're going to take a quick break from our discussion about Malladus to talk a little bit about the villains in The Legend of Zelda. So, inside the Legend of Zelda series, it's kind of a bad thing that's been happening as of late in terms of people talking about how the villains in Zelda that aren't Ganondorf are bad. Or there's people who sometimes they're a little bit down on the fact that Ganondorf isn't the star of every game as the villain. And I am a huge Ganondorf fanboy, and I feel very sad that we haven't seen a Ganondorf canon game in 8 years. We've gone 8 years. The last news story we had of Ganondorf was Twilight Princess in 2006. So it's been 8 years since we've had a new Ganon story. So I understand the struggle, but that doesn't mean we can't appreciate the villains. And I kind of wanted to touch on them, on why these villains that we have are so unique and interesting. So first off is Zant. Now everybody likes to go to Zant because Zant is a character who you believe is the main villain for a good, I'd say, half of the game before Ganondorf really starts taking a central focus inside the game's eyes. But the entire point of Zant as a character was to show you how manipulative Ganondorf is. Ganondorf goes to Zant and shows him that he's a god, and that Zant is a weakling and a simple-minded fool who's just searching for someone to follow. Zant was a follower, and if you think that you want to defeat a follower as your main boss, I think that's a little bit of a bad thing. But that's not to say Zant was a bad character. It was so cool seeing how this fellow who was down. He was down inside his tribe, the Twilight people. The Twilight people didn't really. He was very frustrated. We saw that much. We can't assume everything about who he was, but when he got power, he became mad and sick with the power. So it's really interesting. Girahim's another big example. Of course, Girahim was with Demise, the main villains of Skyward Sword. And Girahim was somebody interesting because he was also a follower. He was a follower that was leading towards the revival of Demise. And he played the rules so well. He played it to the point where you didn't even realize what was going to happen. At the end of the game, you discover, wow, this entire time we've been building up to this point where we learn the origins of all these villains that we've seen in the future. And it's kind of an interesting moment. That's why Demise makes to be a very good villain. Girahim was this character that assisted Demise in becoming this moment. Because if you were battling Demise every time you saw Girahim in the game instead, it would quickly wear thin, and Demise wouldn't have been that character that you see at the end of the game when his hair alights red for the first time. You wouldn't have that moment. The purpose of Girahim is suspense. He's a sword. He is the weapon. He is not Demise. But when you see it all come together, it makes Demise so much more intimidating, and Demise makes for this excellent villain that really sends fear down into you. And some people say he felt shoehorned in, but I don't. I feel like it was this proper build-up this entire time. That's the same argument for Zant. Everybody's like, it felt like they were just shoehorning and Ganondorf at the end, or they're just shoehorning Demise in at the end. And it's like, no, these characters, Zant and Girahim, were there for the purpose of suspense and build-up, because if you pay attention to the in-game text, it's very clear that they've been waiting to introduce this big bad the entire time, and that's, in my opinion, good storytelling. Yuga is almost somebody similar, because it's a lot of people's first thing that they think of when they think of Yuga. They like to compare him to Aghanim and say he is going to resurrect Ganon, and Ganon's going to come alive again in this video game. But that's not the case, in fact. It's really interesting that, again, Yuga and Aghanim, Aghanim is like that. He's also like a suspense villain, but Yuga broke the mold. He broke the mold set by Aghanim, Zant, and Girahim. He set this weird precedent where he was saying, no, I don't want to resurrect Ganon. I want to be Ganon. I want to take Ganon's corpse and put myself into it. Like that's an insane thing, and it's really crazy that it actually happened in the game. It makes Yuga a much more interesting villain. We had an entire discussion about Yuga, and we never really touched on that, on how crazy of a point is that Yuga kind of breaks the mold of all these previous villains by, instead of just being a follower of Ganondorf, he's becoming better than Ganondorf. That's his goal, is to become even more powerful than Ganon was. So yeah, it's an insane moment. But then there's one villain. There's Vaati. Vaati is this character who, inside the timeline, is their own villain. They're their own villain. They're doing their own things. But at the end of Vaati's life, what does Vaati do? Vaati makes a mistake. Vaati becomes another follower, like Zant and Girahim and Aghanim before him. Actually, after him, technically. Well, both. Vaati follows Ganondorf, gets duped, and like Zant with his head being snapped, Girahim being forced into a sword, and Aghanim falling to Link, Vaati is killed as well because it was another blind follower of Ganondorf. But Vaati is such a good villain in that we saw them when they were their own villain in Four Swords Adventures, inside the Minish Cap and Four Swords. They're two games where Vaati proves to us that as a villain, they're a very strong villain, and it's really cool to see how Vaati was this huge big bad inside the Minish Cap, and how quickly things can change when Ganondorf comes strolling on into the room. And then there's Malladus. Malladus is the one that's the most different. Yuga is different because he aspired to be Ganon. Vaati is different because he was the big guy until he made a mistake. Malladus is different because Malladus doesn't really give us much in terms of who they are or what they are. Malladus comes out of this tower, takes control of Zelda, takes control of Chancellor Cole, and gives us this weird feeling that he's related to Ganon in some way, but it's never explicitly said, and it's weird for us. And like, what is Malladus's purpose in the story and lore? Is this their way as Zelda game developers to heading towards a new frontier of saying, we no longer have Ganondorf. Ganondorf is a rock at the bottom of the ocean inside another world. This is Malladus. He is your new bad guy. I, for one, kind of hope it's not. As much as I love Malladus and I want to talk about him tonight, we have some interesting theories already. I think it's very interesting that there's a possibility that Malladus might become the sole villain in that timeline. It all depends on what the plan is for the Zelda timeline, and only time will tell on that one. I'm sorry if I was a bit repetitive word-wise inside that. I kind of wanted just to free-flow it, and it fell apart in some parts, but I'm okay. It fell apart in some parts. This show is truly the show about redundancy tonight, isn't it? Anyways, that was just a few thoughts on some of the villains of the Zelda land. It's interesting. We have Zant, a follower. Girahim, a follower. We have Aghanim, a follower. We have, and then we break the mold. We have Vaati, who becomes a follower. We have Yuga, who aspires to take control of Ganon. And we have Malladus, who is the weirdest of all, because we don't know what he is. And that's why tonight's discussions are so fun. And I hope you guys continue to build off of that and give me some thoughts on who you think Malladus is and what their purpose is in this grand timeline that we're painting of the Zelda series. If you want to discuss this, be sure to go on over to radiohyrule.com/chatroom and have some fun with that. But for now, I'm going to sit back and listen to some glorious Zelda remixes and music. Got a little bit more Spirit tracks, and then we're going to get into some new OC remixes that came out this week that I'm sure you guys want to hear. So please enjoy. I'll be back in just a few. Welcome on back to Hyrule Academy, my good friends and students of the Academy. I hope you've been having a wonderful evening. I sure know that I have. I guess that's what I'm going to say. Yeah, it's been a wonderful evening. We're talking about Malladus. We're going to get on into that discussion in just a moment. But first, let's recap what you've been listening to. First up was the Spirit Tracks medley from the Zelda Symphony, of course, arranged by the wonderful Chad Sider, of course. An excellent fellow, and somebody I hope I get to meet at the Pokemon Symphony in Pittsburgh come January. That's something I will make sure to report back to you guys with full details about when that happens. And that was requested for us by John McKay. Of course, thank you to John McKay, a huge fan of the Symphony of the Goddesses. So you always make sure to get those Zelda Symphony of the Goddesses requests in every single week. After that, we heard Heroes Rest by Chimpzilla and Jordan Rubin. I almost said Rubin. Jordan Rubin, and that is a new song on OC Remix's website this week. It was a very excellent little. It had a nice beat to it, didn't it? It was really nice. After that, we heard a nice piano medley called Zelda's Lament by PI 511, and it is also a new OC remix song that came out this week. Be sure to check out both of those songs. I really enjoyed that nice piano music. It really helped calm us down before we have our big fun times here in terms of talking about Malladus. So let's talk about him, shall we? Let's talk about him, because I know you guys have been waiting for that for some time. All right, so you guys have been abuzz this evening about who Malladus is, when and where he came from, and how he was defeated. And of course, the biggest thing we heard a lot of this evening, and it's kind of expected. I didn't not expect it, but we had a lot of discussion about Demise and how Malladus is the reincarnation of Demise, because Ganondorf is, of course, at the bottom of the ocean with the Master Sword in his head. Is he considered dead? If he is, that means the curse must continue in the form of Malladus, and that is an excellent theory. It's a fine one. We also did hear some more offbeat theories this evening, and I was trying to push for it a little bit towards the end of our discussions, because as much as I believe inside the Ganon being dead and Malladus being the new incarnation theory, I like to explore other ideas, because there's a very high possibility that maybe Ganondorf down at the bottom of the ocean is still quite alive, and we just got to pull the sword out and he'll be back ready to get back into the fighting. You know, we don't know that. We don't know what's going to happen in the future of the Zelda series, so that's our job as theorists to kind of speculate and think and try to come up with our own stories. Anyways, let's get on into your guys' words. Super Zelda Girl says that they think Malladus is just another demon from another part of the world. It's not related to Demise, that Malladus is just a demon that comes out of nowhere. And Trina backs up with a little bit of facts and quotes, saying that Malladus, of course, comes from the Dark Realm inside the game Spirit Tracks, and it's a world covered by inky blackness where demons make their nest. So hey, that fits pretty well. A place where demons sleep and nest, that's where they live, where the demons live inside the Dark Realm. Malladus comes from the Dark Realm to start doing some bad things, as demons like to do. It's not a bad theory. It's a very valid one. But then we started thinking about, when did Malladus show up? Did Malladus show up before any of this happened? Before Link and Tetra arrived at the land? Yasutaro has some information for us, saying that the introduction of the game says that after a period of relative peace for the first settlers of the land, the Demon King Malladus rose to power, began to cause much devastation, forcing the spirits of good of the land to engage him in a prolonged war. So yes, that's an interesting thing. It talks specifically about the first settlers of the land. The question is, and it never really says it, are the first settlers of the land Link and Tetra? Or were there people beforehand, and it was only after Link and Tetra came and established the kingdom of New Hyrule that it became known as New Hyrule, and they brought new settlers? Or was this a place that was already settled? And that's something we don't actually have concrete evidence for, but we do have some more discussions. Wraith says, if I remember right, Malladus was sealed before Tetra and Link from Wind Waker arrived. And we have a little bit of discussion or reply to that from Yasutar, who said, there's only one person who makes a claim of Malladus being sealed before Tetra and Link showing up. Only one person in the game. However, Nico's picture story in the game, when Nico's giving you pictures inside the beginning of the game, he says, he implies that the Spirit War happened after Link and Tetra appeared, that after the first settlers of the land appeared, Malladus rose to power. And Trina kind of adds on and says, most of Nico's picture show seems to be things that he's experienced in person. And it's not, again, it's not proof, but because Nico's story, when he tells the story to you, it's all about, hey, I'm Nico, and this is what I did, back when I was traveling with my good friend Tetra or whatever. And that's interesting to me. It's very interesting that Nico's picture story could be, if it is entirely in person, that means that yes, the war happened while he was alive after this first settling. And that's a possible theory, and it's something you can go off of. Now, Bubba Kev has a very interesting theory, and it was one that nobody really recognized at the chat, but I saw, and I wanted to make sure we mentioned it tonight. Bubba Kev says, I think Malladus was sealed in the time between the Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass, because in that time period, they went from sailing ships with sails to steam-powered machines, because trains were powered by steam. So at the same time period, the steamship was also invented. So how they're kind of saying is, between the Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass, we see a steamship come into existence. And we also see that means that the possibility of the technology for trains also being existing at that time. Why is this important? Because the spirit tracks are train tracks. How can they have sealed Malladus with train tracks without knowing that trains would one day be a thing? You gotta know trains are gonna be a thing if you're gonna seal something with train tracks, The spirits of good must have been like, okay, let's seal this fellow away, and we're gonna use train tracks so it also helps people with transportation. Isn't that interesting? It's very interesting. It's just a theory, though, so go off that if you want to. Now, Yasitaru brought up something that interested me highly, and it's going on off the demise is responsible for Malladus situation, and that is how there is no Triforce really inside New Hyrule. The only real symbolism we have of higher beings is through the spirits of good and their symbol, which is a single triangle. And we see that on the Locomo's vehicle. And Yasitaru says, I think it points as being away from the Triforce, which means Malladus is being in reincarnation demise being highly unlikely, saying that because this isn't a land of the Triforce, maybe the curse doesn't apply. And that's a theory I like to kind of, think about. Hey, perhaps it's unrelated. They've moved land. Remember what the King of Hyrule says at the end of the Wind Waker? That land will not be Hyrule. It will be your land. He's saying Hyrule is here. This is where the Triforce is. This is where Ganondorf is. This is where the Master Sword is in his head. I'm going to die under here, and I accept that. But this is Hyrule. You're going to go make a new land. And they call it New Hyrule for whatever reason. But does the curse stay behind? That's a theory for you to determine in your head. Next, though, Yasitaru says, what's curious, though, is why is Malladus' ultimate forms to which he relies on the Demon Train? The Demon Train seems like the last thing he'd want to bring alive, being as his literal binding chains are train tracks. And that's a fun fact that it makes you think. It's like, wait a minute. The only reason Malladus isn't in his full form is because of the spirit tracks. Why is he a train? It's like Superman flying around using a kryptonite airplane. It's like, why would you do that? Doesn't make much sense now, does it? Anyway, just a fun little thing that Yasuhiro came with tonight. Now, about Malladus being defeated, Trina looked up inside the historian, says that as one of the screenshots, it was the suppression of Malladus. The suppression. The suppression is a very specific word. And Yasuhiro expands on it and says, once the kingdom had been freed from the menace of the Demon King, Angina and Locomo tribe determined that the people no longer required their protection and returned to the heavens. And what's interesting is the word determined inside that sentence. Malladus might not be gone forever. They determined that they no longer require their protection. That means they had to sit down and think about it. The Locomo said, hey, so do you think they need us anymore? They might, but you know what? We should just let them be. So maybe there's the possibility that Malladus is still out there. It's an interesting theory. We don't see ever Malladus really be destroyed inside his plain demon form. We see him destroyed as a merged thing, but I compared it to Harry Potter, where you see Quirrell get destroyed at the very beginning of or at the end of Sorcerer's Stone when he's holding Voldemort, but Voldemort's spirit lives on. Is it a situation like that? You defeat Chancellor Cole, but Malladus lives on, and maybe he'll come back in 3 books. We'll find out next time on Zelda Timeline. I guess we don't really know. So yeah, it's a very interesting set of theories we've had this evening about Malladus, like where they came from, if they really are a reincarnation of Demise, which seems like the most likely option, or if maybe there's something else. Maybe they're not tied to this curse because it's a new land. And we have some interesting thoughts and theories this evening. And you've definitely piqued my interest. I might have to do a little bit of Spirit Tracks playthrough sometime soon. So that'll be fun. Anyways, I got a little bit more music for you, and then we're going to recap tonight's discussions and finish up tonight's show, all right? I got a little bit of Insane in the Rain for you guys. I know you like that, so please enjoy. I'll be back in just a few. And welcome back to Hyrule Academy. So, that was a great music selection. The song we heard there was Dead Air. Turns out my song seems to have been broken, so I know you're excited about for some Insane in the Rain this evening, folks. But it looks like you're not getting any. I'll save that song for next week, it seems like. Crazy stuff. Sorry about that, my friend. Anyways, we're going to finish up tonight's show then on a strong note. Hopefully the last song will work this evening, because I don't got anything else. Okay, so this evening we had some fun discussions, and we talked a little bit about Malladus. Malladus is, of course, a demon, and whether they're from another part of the world or they're the reincarnation of Demise, it's not really a big point for us in developing talking about the lore, because Malladus is this evil demon king, and he's doing all these evil things, and it's very interesting. This entire story of the game revolves around Malladus, this creature who doesn't really give us any information from their mouth. You know, we don't hear Malladus. It's all through Chancellor Cole. It's weird having this villain inside a series that's very powerful, but it's so stoic, you know. And so it's fun to think that we have this new villain. And while a lot of people are calling for the return of Ganondorf, and like I mentioned earlier, it's fun to have these other villains. And it's fine because they're very strong characters, and they thrive on being followers of Ganondorf sometimes. I think it's okay. Even as a fan of Ganondorf, I think it's okay if Malladus was to be the star of the next game and he got to develop his character more. I think that would be muy bueno, to be honest with you. But only time will tell, my friends. Only time will tell. And you guys kind of theorized about when Malladus came about, whether it was before the Wind Waker, after the Wind Waker, after Phantom Hourglass. And again, it's something we won't know unless I get a nice interview with Mr. Anuma. Mr. Anuma, you out there listening to me? You should listen to me. I want to talk to you, my brother. That'd be so much fun. Oh my gosh, can you imagine if I had an hour to sit down with that man? I would make him give us all the answers. I would not come back to the Academy until I had every answer that you guys wanted. But unfortunately, that's not something realistic to think about, is it? Anyways, be sure to tune on in next week. Oh, did I say next week? I made a little mistake. I'm going to be not here next week, everybody. It's my apologies to you. Next week is going to be the release of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, and I'll be doing a live marathon on my Twitch channel. So I'll be busy doing that. But don't worry, in 2 weeks, we'll be back with a very special episode of Hyrule Academy. It's called Holidays in Hyrule. That's right, we're going to be discussing some holidays in the Legend of Zelda series and some festivals and celebrations that we see happen. And I want to theorize about them. I think it'll be a really fun time, especially as we'll be so near Thanksgiving for us here in America. For those of you abroad, of course, Christmas is still coming up in the holiday season, so some holidays in Hyrule would be a very fun discussion. Anyways, if you want to continue to support Radio Hyrule and what we're doing, be sure to go to radiohyrule.com/donate and throw a few rupees on inside the big wallet. Currently, we're raising money to go to MagFest, the music and gaming festival. I'm going to be there, and I want to get my other Radio Hyrule buddies there because we have a very exciting event planned out there. And not only will I get to meet some of you listeners, but I'll also get to have some fun. All right? So I don't want to reveal all the details. Hopefully, our good friend Eric will put up some information on the site one day soon. But we can't do it without your guys' help. So be sure to go again over to radiohyrule.com/donate and throw in just a couple rupees. A few rupees will go a long way. So thank you, my friends. If you want to email me, my email is mc@supermcgamer.com. You can give me some requests and discussion suggestions if you so choose. I don't care. Throw them in there. I'll get to them eventually. I promise you that. Anyways, my friends, it's been a wonderful evening. And I thank you, as always, for your inputs. I apologize that our last song there didn't work out. But I still have one more for you. Hopefully it works. I can't promise anything because I don't know what happened there. But we have Ga Metal's Dark World theme, and that is a request from our friend Grumblezard. Thank you to Grumblezard for the request. Thank you all for tuning into Hyrule Academy every week right here on Radio Hyrule. I will see you guys next time.